The sky was a bruised shade of twilight, the sun sinking below the horizon as the world seemed to hold its breath. A heavy silence had fallen over the small town of Ashcroft, a silence that didn't bode well. People had been disappearing, strange news flickering in snatches across hastily posted bulletins and sporadic radio signals. Whispers of something unnatural creeping through the shadows were no longer dismissed as rumors. The town was on edge, and darkness wasn't just about the setting sun anymore. Eli Mercer tightened his grip on the worn handle of his baseball bat, stepping cautiously through the deserted streets. Every creak of a loose board, every distant groan carried weight now. His breath came in shallow bursts, his eyes darting left and right beneath the brim of his weathered cap. He wasn't just walking home from the corner store anymore, he was navigating a gauntlet where every shadow could harbor death. It had started 3 days ago, an unexplainable sickness spreading through the town, followed by attacks that turned the infected into something horrific. No one really understood how it began. Some said it was a virus, others blamed a government experiment gone wrong. Eli didn't have time to wonder why. Right now, surviving the night was all that mattered. The streetlights flickered weakly, some dead, casting uneven pools of light. Ahead, Eli spotted a dark figure slumped near the entrance of the old library. Heart pounding, he slowed, trying to make out the form. It was a man, his eyes blank and glazed over, skin pallid and torn at the edges. Eli's stomach clenched, he knew what this meant. The man was no longer human. He was one of them. Without hesitation, Eli raised his bat and swung hard, the dull crack of impact echoing through the empty street. The figure crumpled, but before Eli could catch his breath, more groans arose behind him. He spun around, spotting 2 more staggering toward him, their movements jerky but relentless. Panic surged, but training kicked and Eli swung, ducked, and moved with a desperate agility born of months surviving this nightmare. The fight was brutal yet silent. No monstrous growls or screeches, only the unsettling shuffles and guttural noises of the undead. Eli's bat met skull, his feet pounding as he backed toward the safety of a narrow alleyway. He glanced down at his hands, bruised, trembling, but still steady. Every second counted now. He knew this was just the beginning. As he slipped into the alley, Eli's mind raced back to the last days before everything changed. The news broadcasts had warned of a viral outbreak spreading quickly, cities quarantined, military forces overwhelmed. Ashcroft had been quiet at first, too quiet. Then came the sudden attacks, friends turning on friends, neighbors vanishing without a trace. And now, the darkness felt alive, hiding horrors just out of sight. He moved swiftly, ducking behind a rusted dumpster, catching his breath. The narrow space offered momentary refuge but no long-term safety. Eli had learned the hard way that nowhere was truly safe anymore. His phone had died hours ago, cutting him off from the outside world. Radio silence was the new normal. Trust was scarce. Survival was a lonely battle. A soft clatter caught his attention. From the shadows emerged a young woman, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. She held a crowbar, eyes wide with fear yet determined. Eli's instinct was to shout a warning, but she froze the moment their eyes met. "Are you alone?" she whispered, voice trembling but urgent. "For now," Eli replied, lowering his bat slightly but keeping ready. "Name's Eli." "You?" "Clara," she said. "I've been trying to find others, but it's just been me." Together, they edged forward, careful to avoid making noise. Clara explained how she'd been trapped in her apartment when the outbreak hit, barricading doors and windows until the undead found their way in. She'd barely escaped with her life, losing her family somewhere in the chaos. Now, she was searching for any safe place, any sign of help. Eli nodded grimly. He'd lost everyone too, his parents, his best friend, all swallowed by this darkness creeping over the world. Yet meeting Clara sparked a faint hope. Maybe they weren't completely alone. Maybe together they had a chance. Suddenly, a distant crash shattered the silence. A car alarm blared in the distance, followed by a chorus of groans. Both froze, adrenaline surging. Zombies were converging on that sound, no doubt about it. "We need to move," Eli said, voice low but steady. That noise will draw them all. Clara nodded, gripping her crowbar tighter. They sprinted through the winding alleys, darting past abandoned cars and debris. The smell was unbearable, decay and despair mingling in the cold night air. But neither dared to slow. They reached a small convenience store, its glass front shattered and the inside ransacked. Eli motioned for Clara to stay low as he checked inside. The place was empty, but shelves were tipped, and cans scattered everywhere. A hollow reminder of lives interrupted. "This could work," he said, peering out the broken door. "We can barricade this, keep watch." Clara scanned the street. "But for how long?" "They're everywhere out there." Eli swallowed the lump rising in his throat. She was right. The undead were relentless. Every hour brought new dangers, more infected wandering closer, and the creeping fear that the darkness itself was closing in. As they gathered what they could for defense, boards, tools, anything to keep the monsters at bay, the sound of distant footsteps and muffled voices startled them. Someone else was out here. Someone alive. Eli motioned for silence, his grip tightening on the bat. They hid behind the counter as a shadowy figure stepped inside. A man, ragged but cautious, holding a flashlight that swept across the room. "Who's there?" the stranger called softly. Eli stepped forward, raising his voice. "It's safe. We're survivors." Relief flickered in the stranger's eyes. "Name's Marcus. I've been trying to find a group, anyone who's still alive." Together, the three of them locked the door, forming a fragile alliance in a world gone dark. Outside, the groans and shuffles continued, an endless reminder that the night was far from over. Inside, with nothing but their will to survive, they faced an uncertain future. The darkness was no longer just the absence of light, it was a battlefield where every moment was a fight for life. Eli looked at Clara and Marcus, knowing this was just the beginning of a struggle that would test their courage, their trust, and their very humanity. The world outside was lost to the darkness, but as long as they stood together, there was a glimmer of hope. And sometimes, hope was the most powerful weapon of all. End of Part 1. The cold grip of night deepened, swallowing the small convenience store in shadows as Eli, Clara, and Marcus gathered what little supplies they could salvage. Their breaths came in short gasps, echoing the weight of the moment, three strangers bound by circumstance, trapped in a town that no longer belonged to the living. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, the thin flashlight beam trembling in his hand. "We need a plan," he said quietly. "Staying here isn't going to work long-term. The undead will keep coming, drawn by any noise." Eli nodded grimly. "I know a place," he said. "An old fire station on the edge of town. It's sturdy, stocked with gear from before this all happened. If we can get there, we might hold out longer." Clara's eyes flickered with cautious hope. "How far is it?" "About a mile," Eli answered. "We'd have to move carefully. The streets are crawling." A silence fell over them, the kind that only comes when survival balances on a razor's edge. Every second in this world carried the weight of danger, one wrong move, one stray sound, could mean the end. As they prepared to leave, the faintest noise made all three freeze. A slow tapping, like fingers drumming on glass, came from the broken storefront window. Eli raised his bat, signaling the others to stay low. "Wait," Marcus whispered, "I think it's someone else." The tapping continued, tentative, desperate. Eli crept forward, eyes narrowed. On the other side of the glass was a young boy, no older than 10, his face pale and smeared with dirt. His wide eyes locked with Eli's, fear and pleading shining through. "Help me," the boy mouthed silently. Eli glanced back at Clara and Marcus. They exchanged hesitant nods. No one was safe anymore, not even children. But leaving him meant condemning him. Without a word, Eli carefully pried open the door, letting the boy slip inside. His name was Sam, trembling as he clutched a ragged backpack. "My parents," he whispered. "They're gone." The group grew heavier, their burden multiplied by the presence of the child. They couldn't afford distractions, not now. Yet abandoning Sam was unthinkable. Survival had become a shared fight. After a quick rest and some meager food scavenged from the store, they set off into the night. The fire station wasn't far, but the journey was perilous. The streets were silent but thick with menace, shadows shifting just beyond their sight. The first warning came when a single groan broke the quiet. From a side alley, two figures emerged, zombies, their movements slow but relentless. Eli raised his bat. "Stay behind me." The fight was brutal but swift. Clara swung her crowbar with fierce determination, striking one down, while Marcus grabbed a heavy pipe to fend off the other. Sam shrank back, eyes wide, clutching Eli's jacket. After the fight, silence returned, more oppressive than before. The trio wiped sweat and dirt from their faces, but they couldn't afford to pause long. They moved quickly, the fire station looming like a beacon in the distance. Its brick walls were scarred, windows barred, but it was a fortress compared to the ruined streets. Inside, they found remnants of a forgotten world, bunks stacked in corners, dusty helmets and gear hanging on hooks, supplies neatly shelved as if waiting for a storm. Eli immediately began barricading the entrances, while Clara and Marcus searched for anything useful. Sam sat on a cot, his small hands trembling as he clutched a worn photograph, a family portrait now stained and torn. Eli watched him with a pang of sympathy. The world had stolen everything from this boy. Hours passed with tense silence, broken only by the occasional distant moan echoing through the night. The fire station felt safer, but safety was fragile. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the quiet. The front door rattled violently as something pounded against it, an undead horde, drawn by their presence. Panic flared. "Barricade!" Eli shouted, rushing to reinforce the door with heavy crates and metal bars. Clara and Marcus joined him, their hands shaking but resolute. Sam huddled in a corner, eyes squeezed shut. The pounding grew louder, the relentless assault shaking the very foundation. The group braced themselves for the inevitable, hearts pounding in unison. Then, the pounding stopped. Eli peeked through a crack, silence. "Too quiet," Marcus muttered. "They're not giving up." Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The power was out. Clara fumbled for her flashlight, but it was dead. Eli's phone had no signal. The world had become a place of shadows and fear, where danger could come from any direction. "Stay calm," Eli whispered. "We need to stick together." They lit candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shapes on the walls. Every noise outside became amplified, the rustling of leaves, a distant scream, the slow, shuffling footsteps growing ever closer. Hours stretched on, their nerves fraying with every passing moment. Sam's quiet sobs were a painful reminder of the innocence lost. Suddenly, a faint tapping echoed from the back of the station. Eli motioned for silence, signaling the others to prepare. Slowly, they moved toward the sound. Behind a stack of crates, they found a trapped man, bleeding but alive. He gasped, "Please, help me." Clara knelt down, tearing a piece of cloth to bandage his wounds. "We can't leave anyone behind," she said firmly. The man introduced himself as David, a local who had been hiding since the outbreak. His knowledge of the town and its dangers was invaluable, and his presence bolstered their fragile hope. Together, the five of them formed a tentative family in the darkness. Outside, the undead waited, their patience as relentless as the night itself. Eli looked around at the small group, broken, scared, but still standing. This was their fight now, a battle not just for survival, but for the flicker of humanity still burning within them. The darkness was no longer just an absence of light, it was a test of will. And they had no choice but to face it head-on. Because in a world lost to the undead, giving up meant becoming one of them. The cold, flickering candlelight cast long, uneasy shadows across the fire station's cracked walls as the small group settled into a tense silence. David, the newest addition, leaned against the worn lockers, trying to catch his breath. His clothes were torn and stained, a grim testament to the dangers lurking just outside. Eli studied him closely, the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. "How long have you been out there?" he asked quietly. "Since it started," David replied, voice hoarse. "I've been hiding in basements and back alleys, avoiding the streets as much as I could. But it's only a matter of time before they find me." Marcus shifted uneasily, the tension between hope and despair tightening their small circle like a noose. "What about safe zones? Are there any left?" David's eyes darkened. There were shelters, but they fell quickly. The government's response was too slow, and the virus spread faster than anyone expected. Now, the cities are overrun, and the countryside isn't much better. Clara's fingers tightened around her crowbar. "We can't just sit here waiting for the end. We need a plan to get out. Maybe find other survivors." The room fell silent again. Sam, the boy, wiped his eyes and clutched the torn photograph to his chest. "I want to find my sister," he whispered. "She was supposed to meet me here, but she never came." Eli's heart clenched at the boy's words. "We'll do everything we can to find her," he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The world outside was no place for hope, yet it was all they had left. Suddenly, a sharp noise from outside shattered the fragile calm, a distant scream, followed by frantic pounding footsteps. Everyone froze. "Zombies," David said grimly. "They're moving closer." Eli grabbed his bat, signaling the others to prepare. The pounding grew louder, voices shouting in the distance, but these weren't human. The undead were swarming, drawn by sound and movement. The group moved quickly, barricading the remaining windows and doors with whatever heavy objects they could find. The pounding turned into a violent assault as the zombies slammed against the fire station's walls, their guttural groans filling the night air. "Hold them off!" Eli shouted, gripping his bat tight. The first wave hit the barricades, the wooden boards creaking under the relentless pressure. Clara swung her crowbar with fierce determination, felling the closest undead with precise, brutal strikes. Marcus wielded a metal pipe, striking with controlled strength to keep the creatures at bay. But the horde was too large. One board splintered, and a zombie lunged inside, its rotten hands clawing for flesh. Sam screamed and ran to Eli, who knocked the creature back with a powerful blow. The battle was chaotic, a desperate fight for survival in a fortress built from hope and fear. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the room as a second board gave way. More undead poured in, teeth snapping, eyes wild. David grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it in the face of the nearest zombie, buying a precious moment. "We have to fall back," he yelled. Eli nodded. "To the basement. Now." The group retreated through a narrow stairwell leading below, their footsteps hurried and heavy. The basement was cramped and dark, the only light coming from the flickering candles they'd brought. Once inside, Eli sealed the hatch, listening to the pounding above. The undead clawed and growled, but the basement held, for now. Breathing hard, Clara leaned against the wall. "We can't stay here long. They'll find a way in eventually." Marcus wiped sweat from his brow. "We need to move at dawn, find another place to hide." David looked around, then nodded. "There's an old radio tower a few miles east. If it's still operational, maybe we can contact others, or at least get a signal." The idea sparked a flicker of hope among them. If communication was possible, it meant they weren't completely alone. Eli's gaze swept over the group, 4 people, each carrying their own burdens, fears, and faint glimmers of hope. "At first light, we move," he said. "But we have to be ready. The world out there is darker than any night we've faced." Sam's small voice broke the tense silence. What if I don't find my sister?" Eli crouched down to meet the boy's eyes. "We're going to do everything in our power. But no matter what happens, we stick together. That's how we survive." The night stretched on, filled with restless sleep and quiet prayers. Outside, the groans and shuffles of the undead never ceased, a constant reminder that the world they knew was gone. As dawn's pale light began to seep through the cracks, Eli stood at the basement door, listening. The pounding had stopped. For now. The fight for survival was far from over. But together, they had a chance. Dawn cracked the sky with muted hues of gray and pink, casting a fragile light over the devastated town. The basement was still and heavy with tension as Eli, Clara, Marcus, David, and young Sam prepared themselves for the journey ahead. The silence was only broken by the faint rustling of supplies and the occasional creak from the old fire station above. Eli knelt beside Sam, checking the boy's backpack once more. Inside were a few meager essentials, a water bottle, a handful of granola bars, and the tattered photograph of Sam's missing sister. The boy's face was pale but determined, a stubborn flicker of hope in his eyes that refused to be snuffed out by the darkness around them. "Are you ready?" Eli asked softly. Sam nodded, clutching his backpack tight. "I have to find her." Clara checked the makeshift weapons they had, Eli's bat, her crowbar, Marcus's metal pipe, and David's fire extinguisher. It wasn't much, but it was what had kept them alive so far. The group climbed the stairs, the heavy hatch creaking open with a sound that felt loud enough to wake the dead. Eli peered cautiously outside. The fire station was eerily quiet, the morning fog swirling thick and low, muffling sounds and hiding dangers. "Let's move," Eli whispered, eyes scanning every shadow. They slipped out into the cold morning air, stepping carefully onto the cracked pavement. The streets, littered with abandoned cars and debris, were hauntingly still. Not a single moan or shuffle broke the silence, too quiet, and that was dangerous. David led the way, his knowledge of the town's back routes their best chance to avoid the zombie hordes. They kept to the shadows, moving slowly but steadily toward the radio tower, a beacon of hope in a world gone dark. As they passed an overturned truck, Marcus froze. His eyes locked on a twitching hand poking from beneath the wreckage. "Zombies," he hissed. Eli raised his bat, signaling the group to hold their ground. Suddenly, the hand twitched again, and a voice cracked weakly, "Help, please." Eli's grip on his bat loosened. It wasn't Undead, just a man, barely conscious, trapped under the vehicle. "Get him out," Clara ordered. Together, they worked quickly, heaving the heavy truck enough to free the man's legs. He collapsed onto the pavement, coughing, eyes wild with fear. "My name's Jack," he gasped. "I was trying to find safety, but got caught." They helped Jack to his feet, offering water and a moment's rest. The group had grown, another survivor, another story etched in desperation. "We have to move," Eli reminded. "The radio tower, if it's still working, it could be our lifeline." With Jack leaning heavily on Marcus, the group continued. The journey was slow, the tension thick as they navigated alleyways and side streets. Every shadow, every sudden noise made them flinch. Halfway to the tower, Clara stopped abruptly. "Did you hear that?" A low growl rumbled from a nearby alley. The group froze as several zombies emerged from the mist, their eyes glinting with hunger. "Get ready," Eli warned. The narrow street left no room to run. The fight was brutal. Clara's crowbar cracked bone as she struck down one of the creatures, while Marcus swung his pipe with desperate strength. Eli blocked a lunge, driving his bat into a snarling face. Jack, despite his injuries, grabbed a broken pipe to defend himself. Sam huddled behind Eli, clutching the photograph tightly, eyes wide with terror. The battle seemed endless, each strike answered by another groan. But they were skilled and determined, survivors who had learned quickly. When the last zombie fell, the group collapsed onto the sidewalk, breath ragged, limbs trembling. "Too close," David said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We can't afford another fight like that." Eli nodded grimly. "We need to reach that tower before more come." Finally, the radio tower appeared, a tall, skeletal structure rising above the rooftops like a silent sentinel. Its base was surrounded by a chain-link fence, partially collapsed but still standing. They climbed through the gap and entered the small control building at the tower's base. Dust covered the equipment, and the faint smell of rust filled the air. David immediately went to work, inspecting the radios and electrical panels. "If we can get power and tune into a frequency, we might contact others, maybe find a safe zone or rescue." The rest of the group kept watch, eyes scanning the broken windows and the foggy horizon. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours as David fiddled with the controls. The radio crackled with static, then a faint voice emerged, barely audible, but real. "Is anyone out there? This is Station 47, broadcasting emergency signal." "Repeat, emergency signal." Hope surged through the group. They weren't alone. "Station 47, Eli called into the microphone. This is a survivor group near your location. We need help. Coordinates are." Static swallowed the rest. David cursed under his breath. The signal's weak, but it's something. Eli looked at the group, feeling a rare flicker of optimism. "We have to keep trying. This could be the start of something better." But even as they clung to hope, the world outside remained unchanged, silent, dangerous, and full of the undead. The fight for survival was far from over. The darkness was still waiting, and they would have to face it again. But now, they had a mission. A purpose. To find safety. To find others. To find a way back to life. And together, they would face whatever came next. The fading echoes of the radio signal lingered in the cramped control room, a fragile thread tying the small group to a world they barely recognized anymore. The hope sparked by that faint broadcast weighed heavily on Eli's mind, but the danger outside remained pressing and immediate. "We can't stay here long," Clara said, voice tense. "If they find this place, we're trapped." David nodded. "The power might hold for a little while, but once the batteries die, this radio goes silent." Eli stood and paced, eyes darting toward the windows, where the fog thickened and swallowed the streets beyond. "We need to get to that safe zone Station 47 mentioned. If it's real." Jack, still limping, frowned. "You think it's real? After everything we've seen?" "We don't have a choice," Eli said firmly. "If we stay here, we die. If we go, maybe we survive." Sam looked up, hopeful yet scared. "I want to find my sister." "We will," Eli promised, kneeling down. "But first, we have to get through this." The group packed up quickly, the weight of the unknown heavy on their backs. They left the radio tower behind, stepping back into the misty streets that seemed to shift with every passing second. The town felt different now, stranger. The silence was no longer just eerie, it was oppressive, as if the shadows themselves were watching, waiting. David led them through winding streets, guiding them toward the highway where the safe zone was supposed to be. Along the way, they spotted signs of other survivors, discarded supplies, hastily scrawled messages on walls, and makeshift barricades. But no people. "That's what's worst," Marcus muttered. "Seeing what's left, but no one around." Hours passed, the journey slow and perilous. Every so often, the group would freeze at the sound of a distant groan or the shuffling of footsteps. Each encounter was a test of nerves and strength. One particularly tense moment came when they found a small grocery store, its windows shattered and aisles upturned. Inside, a half-starved dog growled softly from beneath the counter. Clara crouched and extended her hand. "Easy, boy." The dog emerged cautiously, ribs showing beneath its dirty coat. It looked like it had been alone for a long time, just like them. "Maybe he can come with us," David suggested. "Dogs are good at warning you when danger's close." Eli nodded. "All right, but he stays close." With their new companion, the group pressed on. The highway was a grim landscape of overturned cars and abandoned belongings. The silence was occasionally pierced by distant, guttural moans, the reminder that the undead still roamed the world like shadows without end. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind them. They spun around just as a large zombie stumbled out from behind a rusted truck, its eyes fixed on the group with hunger. "Fight!" Eli shouted, gripping his bat. Clara raised her crowbar, Marcus's pipe, and David hefted the fire extinguisher. Even Jack grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground. The dog barked furiously, lunging forward and distracting the creature long enough for Eli to swing his bat hard. The zombie fell with a heavy thud. Breathing heavily, the group barely had time to recover when more zombies emerged, drawn by the noise. "Run!" Eli yelled. They dashed down the highway, weaving through abandoned vehicles and debris, the snarling horde close behind. Sam stumbled, but Eli caught him, pulling him back to his feet. The group's desperate sprint led them to an overpass. Eli glanced up and saw a small cluster of buildings beyond, faint signs of human life flickering in the early evening light. "We have to make it there," he urged. They scrambled up a broken staircase, the zombies close behind. Clara smashed the last zombie blocking their path with a powerful strike. Once atop the overpass, they found a narrow, precarious bridge stretching toward the distant buildings. The dog growled lowly, ears pinned back. Eli looked around. "No other way. We cross, quickly." The bridge creaked under their weight as they ran, the undead horde swarming below, unable to follow. But halfway across, the dog stopped, growling fiercely at a shadow lurking beneath the bridge. Without warning, another zombie lunged from below, clawing at the underside of the bridge. The dog barked, snapping at it fiercely. Eli reached down and threw a rock, hitting the creature and buying time. They crossed, breathless and shaken. The buildings ahead were a small, makeshift camp surrounded by barricades. Lights flickered inside, and Eli spotted movement, a figure waving. "We're safe," Sam whispered, tears streaming down his face. But as they approached, a voice called out sharply, "Wait! Who goes there?" A group of armed survivors emerged, cautious but alert. Eli stepped forward, holding up his hands. "We're survivors. We heard the radio broadcast. We're looking for shelter." The leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady grip on her rifle, nodded slowly. "You're lucky we're not zombies. Come in. We'll talk." As they entered the camp, Eli's heart pounded. Maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was beginning to end. But he knew the darkness still waited outside, patient and hungry. The struggle for survival was far from over. The camp was nothing like Eli had imagined. What looked from a distance like a sturdy safe zone was more fragile than he wanted to admit. Makeshift tents, rusted cars barricading entrances, and a handful of weary survivors huddled around a flickering fire told a story of desperation, not safety. The woman who had greeted them introduced herself as Mara, the unofficial leader. Her eyes were sharp and tired, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and learned to trust too little. "Sit," she said curtly, motioning toward a circle of scavenged chairs and crates. "Tell me what you saw. What you heard on the radio." Eli glanced at his group, the exhaustion clear on everyone's faces. Jack winced, pressing his injured side, and Sam sat quietly, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. David was the first to speak. "We made it from the old fire station. The radio tower was barely working, but we caught a broadcast from Station 47. They mentioned a safe zone not far from here." Mara's gaze didn't soften, but she nodded slowly. "That broadcast is real. Station 47 is our main contact. They provide supplies and information when they can. But it's risky. The zombies are growing more organized. They're adapting." Clara swallowed hard. "Adapting? How?" Mara's expression darkened. "They're learning to avoid traps, to hunt in groups. They're not just mindless anymore. It's like the virus has a way of evolving with them." Eli's grip tightened around his bat. The stakes were higher than ever. "We've held this camp for weeks," Mara continued. "But every day the horde gets closer. And food is running low. We need to move, or we die." "Then what?" Eli asked. "Where can we go?" Mara looked out into the night, her jaw set. "There's a fortified bunker about 20 miles east. Supplies, weapons, everything we need to survive. But it's heavily guarded. And the path there, it's a nightmare." Marcus scoffed, his metal pipe resting on his shoulder. "What kind of nightmare?" "Zombies by the hundreds. No safe roads. You're either fast, smart, or you don't make it." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Moving forward meant risking everything, but staying meant certain death. Sam suddenly spoke up, his voice small but steady. "I want to go. I have to find my sister." Eli nodded. "We'll go. Together." Mara studied the group, then finally said, "You'll need supplies. Weapons. And you'll need to move fast." She led them to a storage tent where scavenged gear was piled haphazardly. They took what they could: extra water, canned food, and a handful of knives and pistols with limited ammunition. The camp settled into uneasy rest, the fire crackling as survivors whispered their fears and hopes. Eli kept watch, mind racing with the dangers ahead. As dawn approached, the group prepared to leave. The fog rolled in thick once more, swallowing the camp's faint light. "Be careful," Mara warned. "The horde is out there, and they're waiting." They slipped out quietly, the dog padding beside them like a silent guardian. The first miles were brutal. The roads were choked with wreckage, abandoned vehicles, and the remnants of a world gone mad. The group moved cautiously, stopping often to listen, watch, and catch their breath. At one point, they stumbled upon a small cemetery. Tombstones cracked and weathered, some toppled or broken, whispered of lives lost long before the apocalypse. Eli felt a chill. This is what's waiting for us if we fail. The dog suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward. A faint growl escaped its throat. From behind a mausoleum, a group of zombies shuffled into view. They moved slower than before, but their numbers were greater, dozens, surrounding the group. "We're trapped," Clara whispered. Eli scanned their surroundings. No cover, no escape routes. "Form a circle," he commanded. Back to back. The fight was fierce. Knives flashed, bats swung, and the dog bit savagely, protecting its new family. One by one, the zombies fell, but the group took wounds too. Jack was grazed by a claw, blood seeping through his shirt. "We need to move," Eli urged. "Keep going." They pushed through the cemetery gates, hearts pounding as the groans faded behind them. Hours later, exhaustion creeping in, they reached a deserted highway sign, 20 miles to the bunker. "This is it," Eli said. No turning back. The road ahead was a gauntlet. Shadowed forests lined the cracked pavement, hiding dangers unseen. As night fell again, the group set up a small camp in a hollowed-out ditch. Sam sat beside the fire, staring into the flames. "Do you think we'll find her?" he asked quietly. Eli put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We will. We have to." The dog rested its head in Sam's lap, a silent promise of loyalty. But outside their fragile circle of light, the darkness was gathering. A low, guttural sound echoed from the trees, the unmistakable warning that the horde was closing in once more. The growls came closer. Eli's eyes snapped open. He grabbed his bat and stood, signaling the others to do the same. The fire flickered low, casting long shadows that danced across the trees. "We're surrounded," Clara whispered. The group scrambled to their feet, backs pressed together in a tight circle. The dog growled deep in its throat, fur bristling. Suddenly, the dark shapes emerged from the forest, 20, maybe 30 undead, creeping forward with slow, relentless hunger. "Hold the line," Eli shouted. Blades and bats swung in practiced rhythm. The dog lunged into the pack, biting and clawing, its fierce determination unnerving even the zombies. But the numbers were overwhelming. One zombie caught Marcus off guard, knocking his pipe from his hands. He stumbled backward as another closed in. Eli rushed to Marcus, swinging his bat to break the attacker's grip. "Stay with me." The fight dragged on, the group wearing down under the constant assault. Bloodied and breathless, they managed to push the undead back into the shadows. As silence fell once more, Eli scanned the horizon. The forest was empty again, but their wounds reminded them of the cost. "We need to move before more come," Eli said, voice low but urgent. Jack clutched his side, the pain slowing his steps. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going." Sam looked up, eyes wide. "We can't leave him." "No one gets left behind," Eli promised, adjusting his grip on the bat. "But we have to keep moving." The road ahead stretched endlessly, a dark ribbon through a ruined world. The group pushed forward, exhaustion pulling at their every step. The bunker Mara spoke of was still miles away, a distant hope in a night filled with fear. Hours later, they reached a crumbled bridge spanning a shallow river. The water below flowed dark and slow, reflecting the faint moonlight. "This looks unstable," Clara said, eyeing the cracked supports. "We don't have a choice," Eli said. "We cross carefully." One by one, they made their way across, the boards creaking ominously beneath their weight. Halfway across, a sharp crack echoed. The plank beneath Jack splintered, and he stumbled, falling hard onto the bridge. "Jack!" Eli reached out, grabbing his arm. Jack's face twisted in pain. "I'm fine. Keep moving." "No!" Sam cried. "We can't leave him. Help me!" Jack hissed, pushing himself up. Eli's heart hammered. The zombies were still out there, waiting. With careful hands, the group pulled Jack up, steadying him. The dog barked anxiously, pacing near the edge. Once across, they hurried into the woods on the other side, seeking cover. The forest was dense and dark, each shadow a potential threat. Suddenly, a soft whisper broke the silence. "Did you hear that?" David froze. "It's someone else?" Mara's warnings echoed in Eli's mind. Other survivors could mean salvation or danger. They followed the sound to a clearing where a small group of people huddled around a fire. Faces illuminated by flickering flames, eyes wary and guarded. "Who are you?" Eli called out. A woman stepped forward, hands raised in peace. "We're survivors, like you. Trying to get to the bunker." Relief mixed with suspicion. "We need to stick together," the woman said. "Strength in numbers." The group exchanged glances. They'd fought too hard to refuse help, but trust was fragile. Eli nodded. "All right. Let's move together." As they joined forces, a new sense of hope flickered. But in the back of Eli's mind, a warning lingered. The darkness outside was still watching, waiting to strike. Their fight for survival was far from over. The combined group moved cautiously through the dense forest, their footsteps muffled by fallen leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The new survivors brought fresh faces and unfamiliar voices, but they also carried the weight of their own losses and fears. Eli watched them closely. Trust had to be earned, especially now. The woman who had first spoken introduced herself as Lila. Her eyes were sharp, her movements confident, a stark contrast to the nervous tension hanging over the group. "We're almost there," Lila said, glancing at a crumpled map. "The bunker's just beyond that ridge." The promise of shelter fueled their tired legs. For days, they'd moved through darkness and danger, but now safety was within reach, or so they hoped. As they neared the ridge, the forest gave way to an open field. In the distance, the silhouette of a massive concrete structure stood against the night sky, the bunker. Relief surged through the group, but the calm was fragile. Suddenly, a guttural howl ripped through the air. Heads snapped toward the noise, eyes wide. The ground began to tremble beneath their feet. From the shadows of the forest emerged the largest horde they had yet encountered, hundreds of zombies moving as one, a terrifying tide of relentless hunger. "We've got to run!" Eli shouted, adrenaline flooding his veins. The group sprinted across the field, heartbeats pounding louder than their footsteps. The bunker's steel doors loomed ahead, but they were locked tight. "We need a code!" Lila yelled, pounding on the control panel. Eli turned, swinging his bat at the closest zombies closing in. The dog growled and lunged, buying precious seconds. "Keep trying," he shouted. Jack, despite his injury, helped force the panel. Finally, with a hiss, the doors began to slide open. One by one, the survivors dove inside, the heavy doors grinding shut behind them just as the first zombies reached the threshold. Safe. For now. Inside the bunker, the air was thick but breathable. Fluorescent lights flickered on, illuminating rows of supplies, weapons, and sleeping quarters. Mara stepped forward, relief flooding her face. We made it. But the moment of safety was short-lived. From the control room, a crackling voice came through the radio. This is Station 47. We're detecting a breach. Zombies have penetrated the perimeter. Lockdown protocols initiated. The group exchanged tense glances. The nightmare was far from over. We have to secure the inner doors, Eli said, rallying everyone. Barricade anything we can. The survivors worked quickly, pushing heavy crates and furniture against steel doors. The dog patrolled, alert and ready. Hours passed in a tense silence broken only by distant moans and the occasional thud against the walls. Eli and Mara sat near a map table, planning their next move. We can't stay here forever, Mara said grimly. Eventually, they'll find a way in. Eli nodded. But for now, we fight. Outside, the horde pressed on, relentless as ever. Inside, a fragile hope had been born, a chance to rebuild, to survive, to fight another day. As dawn crept through the bunker's small windows, Eli looked around at the weary faces. They had lost so much, but they had not lost each other. In the darkness, they had found strength. And as long as they stood together, the struggle for survival would continue. End of Part 8. This wraps up your story fully. If you want, I can also help with summaries, intros, or any other content for your audiobooks.